Hello webheads and welcome to another edition of Spider-Man the Animated Series podcast. I'm your host Alex Robson, and with me as always is my co-host, Marvel artist, my brother and all-around friendly neighbourhood guy, Will Robson. Say hello, Will.
Hello everybody, hello.
He sounds fantastic this week because we sorted out the microphone issue.
Yeah, because Tit McGee over here was recording me through his speakers, so...
So apologies listeners, and now it's just going to sound smooth and sexy all the way through.
Now you get to hear my docile tones.
That's right, they get to hear what you actually sound like and not the robot version of you or the guy who works at McDonald's drive-thru.
This is my real speaking voice. Hello!
So this week, we figured what we do with this podcast is pretty much do an episode review and then do something around the show or based around Spider-Man himself. And then do an episode review and continue on from there. So kind of go every other episode, we do something that's outside of the show itself, reviewing.
Yeah, and we're in talks with some voice actors from Spider-Man the Animated Series, so hopefully we can get those guests on sometime soon, because that'd be awesome to interview them and get more insight into the show.
We are, yeah, that was very exciting to get a message from someone in particular who showed interest, and also having people follow us on Twitter that were part of the show. So yeah, hopefully as we go on and build with episodes and our fan base, we'll be able to get more people from the show and get more insight.
And where can they find us on Twitter, guys?
So... to lead in, good segue, if you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to rate, comment and subscribe to us on iTunes, as it helps us wall crawl up the charts and attract more listeners. You can also find us on SoundCloud if you're not an iTunes user, and that's under Spider-Man the Animated Series podcast, you can search. Also be sure to visit us on Facebook and Twitter pages by keyword searching STAS podcast, that's Spider-Man the Animated Series podcast, where you can see images or clips from recent episode discussions, chat about the show, as well as leaving any comments or suggestions about the podcast, as long as you're not a J. Jonah Jameson about the whole thing. You can also you can also follow Will on his social media pages to see his artwork, stay up to date with what he's working on now, and get a glimpse into the workday of a Marvel artist, along with other comic book properties. Will, where can they find you?
You can find me on any social media at Robson INK, Robson Inc., which is a play on words, like I'm an incorporated, but I work with ink. Ha ha ha. I'm very witty and funny. Anyway, that's my handle on everything.
Yeah, I know. See, you're not the only one that does puns, I guess.
I do the occasional pun. I think this morning we were chatting and I did a pun and you were like, hey, you're not allowed to do that. You make fun of me about puns all the time.
Oh, man, I go pun crazy with my wife sometimes. She's just like, all right, I get it.
Yeah, my fiance hates puns as well.
All right, we're in stable relationships. Hooray!
Hooray! Future sorted.
So, before we go into what we're going to do this episode, because it's all about you, I wanted to ask you, because so this past weekend, I for some reason Friday night couldn't sleep. I was up at 3 a.m. Saturday morning, lying in bed looking at my phone thinking I'm not going to be able to get back to sleep. So I went downstairs, cuddled with the dog, and even though I said I'm going to try and hold off on watching the episodes of the show until I review them, I thought, fuck it, I've got to watch Spider-Man. So I put on season 2 and ploughed through like half the season, and the same thing happened to me on Saturday night. Couldn't sleep. Sunday morning, 3 a.m, I'm on the sofa again, and I finished off the other half of season 2. And it is so damn good, and I cannot wait to review it, because it really is, when the show is just like, bam, this is what we're talking about. We've got X-Men, we've got Punisher, we've got fucking Neogenics up the arse, we've got Man-Spider. They just go absolutely bonkers, and it goes really, really well. It just, every episode, I'm like, next one, let's keep on going. This is fucking awesome.
Is this your weird version of Paranormal Activity, where you lean over your wife watching Spider-Man the Animated Series at 3 a.m, rocking back and forth?
Except for what I'm going to be like saying cheesy Spider-Man puns instead.
Oh dear.
I must have been mistaken. So yeah, it was a joy. I mean, I was absolutely shattered Saturday and Sunday.
I bet.
I got no sleep, but yeah, I can't wait to review that whole season, and obviously to continue. But man, is it good! So anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is after watching that, I have a very steep staircase in my house, and I caught myself. So as I go up it, because it's so steep, your body becomes not 90 degrees, but it becomes at such an extreme angle that it's almost fun to put your hands on the steps and crawl up the steps as well.
Well, I know all about that because your stairs are very similar to the stairs I had when I was at university. I used to do the exact same thing. I'd always use my hands to like smack myself up it.
But what I do is I catch myself doing like exaggerated hand poses as I'm crawling up the steps, and I'm humming the Spider-Man theme.
Oh, well, that's because you're a nerd.
Y-
That's why you do that.
But there's got to be other people out there that have done that because I'm 31 now, and I still fucking do it. And granted, like I obviously, as you said, big geek, and I love to act in a way where it's fun and be as close to the characters I love as possible without actually being them, or being as in
Same.
good shape as them. But yeah, the wall crawl up the stairs is something that I've been doing ever since I knew about Spider-Man and could pretend to be him in some form or
And
fashion.
what is your dog waiting at the bottom of the stairs? You turn around and you go, "Spy!"
Oh, that settles a debate, by the way. Let's talk about last episode. So it's not spy at the
I
end.
knew it. I
Yep.
knew it.
It does sound exactly like spy, and it does
No,
sound,
he just goes, "Wow."
but it sounds like the voice. It really does. But anyway, so the words are Spider-Man, Spider-Man, radioactive Spider-Man, Spider Blood, radioactive Spider Blood, and then it does a wicked guitar solo, and then it's Spider-Man, Spider-Man. Then I want to go spy, but unfortunately, it doesn't do that.
No, he just goes, "Wow." Well, that's interesting because didn't you say two of the things they couldn't say was blood and radioactive? So it's just like, fuck that, radioactive blood, Spider-Man, fuck
Yeah,
you, ow.
yeah. And speaking of, and so obviously that falls into the category of censor thwip. But when I was watching season two, there's some serious breaks on censorships, and I'm going to say censor thwip by accident, developer lisp. But yeah, there's some serious breaks in that, and I can't wait to get to it because I was thinking, oh, you weren't supposed to do that, and you did. You weren't supposed to say that, and you did.
I mean, someone has one job to watch these things and check. Like, they're obviously just not very good at their job. They're like, new episode okay? They're like, yeah. Did you watch it? Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. Show's doing well. It's good.
Yeah, there was a few scenes where I was like, they've just reused footage from the first episode of The Lizard, and they're now using it in this episode. You know, they reuse some footage, but we love it. That's why we watch the show.
Hey,
So
I reuse art in comics all the time. I take like someone in the background, I redraw them with a smile.
that's true.
Like if you look at the cover of Great Lakes Avengers 1, like Star-Lord's back there and tons of other characters that I've drawn from other books because I was like, ain't nobody got time to draw a riot scene. I'm just going to copy paste.
That's very true, and this is a good segue to talk about what we're going to talk about this week. So, what we've decided to do is, as I mentioned in a previous episode, Will here, my brother, has been through quite a long journey and many lows and a few highs until he finally reached the top. Uh, but he is now a comic book artist, professional comic book artist, working for titles such as Marvel, Image Comics, IDW. Who else you got on there?
Boom Studios
That's right, Boom
and,
Studios.
and doing WWE covers, which is awesome.
That's true. Yeah, those are great. So obviously, you've now reached a level where you're in the shops and everybody's buying your books, and they're like, "Who's this Will Robson? Because he's pretty amazing, and we need to buy his shit right now."
It's not really like that. I think I think since I've worked at Marvel, I've only gained like 400 followers. So on Twitter, I mean.
What we're going to do is I'm going to interview you on your journey to becoming a professional comic book artist. So anyone out there listening that goes, "Oh, I've always wondered what it's like," or "I've been thinking about doing it," or actually goes, "I really want to do this. How can I do it?" I figured these interviews would be a good insight into the journey, the steps you can take.
Just saying, don't. It's a miserable existence. You get underpaid. Run away.
Yeah, but I think that all the people that once they reach it can say that. It's like actors say that to people when they're like, "I want to be an actor. How can I be an actor?" And they're like, "Just don't be one. Just don't do it."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there's obviously, it's a job, as you said, it's a job at the end of the day. And as much as you can go, that sounds like a pretty cool job, you would still say, yeah, but it is still a job, and there's still,
Oh, and I would say it's a very labor-intensive job that demands more hours and brain function than average jobs. Definitely, like it's tough.
okay, cool. So let's go off and start. Now, what I wanted to ask you first is there is a few questions that I'm going to ask every single person that we interview on this show.
Okay.
I'll come up with a name, or maybe I'll just call them quick questions, so it's not so much punny.
They don't all need puns or theme songs.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
You could just ask a question.
So we'll start with who is your favorite Spider-Man villain and why?
Well, my favorite villain. I love the Shocker, but I don't know if I would say he's my favorite. I just there's it's so as I discussed in this show, I still don't know why I like this villain. He's a pretty lame villain. He always gets beaten up. I just love his costume, and I think it was just the first exposure. I think one of the first Spider-Man comics I owned, it was a Shocker comic, so something like that. But my favorite Spidey villain is probably Venom, I would say.
Good choice, man. I've just watched those episodes recently, and he's just the business.
Eddie Brock's a very interesting character. The symbiote is a very interesting character, and then it flows into Carnage, Anti-Venom. Yeah, he's my favorite.
Cool. Okay. So these are all Spider-Man related, by the way. These quick questions. Then obviously we'll get into the meat of the interview. Who is your favorite Spider-Man ally and why?
Ally in the Spidey universe or in the Marvel universe?
Spidey universe.
In the Spidey universe, I would say Black Cat.
Okay. Why?
Because again, her backstory is so interesting, with her dad being the one that saw the super soldier serum on the chalkboard before it got exploded, however it happened, and she becomes essentially a new Captain America. Captain America is probably my favorite Marvel hero, or one of them at least, besides the Punisher and Spider-Man. And the fact that her character revolves around Captain America is why I like her so much.
Cool. Okay.
Who's your favorite Spider-Man ally?
Who's my favorite Spider-Man ally?
Yeah.
I was thinking about this if I was ever asked, which thank you, because you just did. And I'm
So humbling.
and I'm stalling, that's why. I would probably say that I really dig I don't know if that counts. No, it doesn't count. I think that you did a good job with the one you said. I mean, Robbie Robertson is technically an ally.
Oh, definitely.
So I count him up there because I think Robbie is great, and he's just that wholesome dude that is always there when Spider-Man's feeling like everyone hates him. Robbie's like, I like you. You're a cool dude. Don't worry.
Also, on a side note, I would say one of my favorite Spider-Man villains as well is J. Jonah Jameson. Definitely.
That's pretty good.
I might actually put him above Venom because I love that character so much. So yeah, I'm changing my answer.
Okay, so you're changing to JJ. And that counts, and I also think that he has more potential to damage Spider-Man's reputation and life than anybody else, really, because
Yeah.
he's just got mass media at his fingertips. Yeah, that's a really good one. Well, we had a little story that involved him, didn't we? If we ever wrote a Spider-Man comic together that involved JJ being the main villain.
Yeah, he's great. Really good character.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I would say Robbie for me. I would also say Mary Jane. I think Mary Jane is a definite ally, and I think she's really good, especially when she knows Peter Parker and Spider-Man that are one and the same, because she really does then start to cover for him and sacrifice a lot. So I think she's a pretty good ally.
Yeah, and Aunt May as well.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a little unknowing though. She never really.
Yeah, I
finds
guess
out.
so. I mean, if we're going to go deep cuts, I would say Ben Reilly as well.
Yeah. Hey, he's in Spider-Man the Animated Series way down in season 5, so it kind of counts. This obviously these are questions for the show itself. Otherwise, we could get way deep into comic book geekdom and knowledge. So I'm just reining it in on the show. What is your? We got 2 more questions left. I know, three more questions and then we'll move on. Sorry. What is your favourite episode of the show? I think we briefly spoke about this, but just to reiterate.
And my favorite episode, oof, that is really tough though, because there are lots of really good ones.
There are.
And I love I don't know what episode it is, but the whole arc with Electro being Red Skull's son and involving all of those different characters. I really love that. But I love all the Venom stuff as well. I can't answer that. I just have no idea.
Okay. Well, if you could name an arc, then would it be the Red Skull one or it would be the Venom?
I would say the Red Skull one because I thought that was really fresh. Like I mean, I know that they created some stuff for Venom with the. I'm pretty sure in the animated series it was invented with J. Jonah Jameson's son getting it from outer space, because in the books
it was, yeah.
In the books, it's from Secret Wars, and that's how Spider-Man gets the symbiote, and then he brings it back, all that stuff.
Right.
So I do love all that stuff, and when Carnage comes in as well, I would definitely say all the Red Skull Captain America stuff.
Okay, cool.
Oh, and Spider-Man turning into the eight-legged freak as well.
Oh yeah, the Man Spider is just. Oh, I just watched that. I actually, because you put yourself in Spider-Man's shoes, and I was thinking when I was sitting there, he still has shreds of memory that come through in feelings, and you're like, oh my god, you just imagine being this giant. I mean, like I said, previous episode, I don't like spiders, so to be a giant, grotesque spider is frightening, and then having all your loved ones seeing you and crying and screaming, and then he like runs away in shame. I'm like, oh, Spider-Man!
It's the cartoon version of The Fly starring Spider-Man. It's fucked up.
It's really fucked up.
It's so 90s like metal though. Like it's pretty damn cool though.
It is, and I love that. I just love watching those episodes again. And also, it's like The Fly, as you said. That's a really good pull. But it's like The Fly if The Fly didn't get shot and blown up at the end of the film. Like it gets to live on and be The Fly. Spoiler alert. Yeah, so anyway, enough about that, because obviously we'll get to review that eventually. Why do you think people love Spider-Man so much?
I think Spider-Man is someone you can look up to as a kid, someone you can relate to as a young adult, and someone that just makes you happy as an adult.
Good answer. I like that. And finally, if you could have one of Spider-Man's abilities, whether it be web slinging, wall crawling, super strength, super agility / balance, and spider sense, which one would it be and why?
Now that is a really, like, just to have one, that's actually really tough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I want spider sense, because if I was about to trip down the stairs, I'd get spider sense, I'd be like, what, why? And then I'd still trip and fall. And I'd be going, oh! It would not be useful to me. It would go off and I'd go, oh god, something bad's going to happen. And I have no defense for it at all. So that one's out. Web slinging, it's not even really a power. I mean, it's just he invented it. So I think if I did that, I'd probably dislocate my arm out of my shoulder. So that's no fun. Super strength is great. Super agility is great. But I think I'd probably take wall crawling out of all of them.
Get around quicker.
Yeah, and it would just be fun, just to fuck with people, being like, hey, what are you doing? They're like, oh! Because you're like on the ceiling.
Yeah, exactly. I love that's how you're going to fuck with you, because I know you would do it to your fiance. She would be like coming into the room, and then you'd just be like, boo! And you're on the ceiling. She's like, ah!
Yeah, I'd definitely do that.
And you'd fuck with your dog. That'd be hilarious.
Oh, she'd be barking like mad.
Oh, that'd be so funny. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the meat of the interview. So, question 1. At what age did you decide you wanted to be a comic book artist?
Professionally, I wanted to be a comic book artist when I was 22 going into 23.
Okay. So what inspired you to become a comic book artist? And it doesn't have to be specifically just at 22, 23. It could be going back and then other things that kind of just kept on adding to that pile, and you went, yep, all of those things make sense and I want to do this.
Well, I can tell you, like, in like a time frame of how it all like developed into me being a comic book artist, like where I was like, yep, that's what I want to do, and then how I went from there to be like, this is what I need to do to become one.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if you think that will pertain with what inspired you as well in that question, then go for it.
Well, when it comes to wanting to be a comic book artist, I've always drawn, just like you. We both were always very artsy kids. We'd always draw whatever cartoon or anything we were watching, any drawing that we liked, we would just draw a replica of it, and we were pretty good at replicating what we saw. So I know you used to love Jim Lee, so you used to always redraw Jim Lee Batmans and stuff, and we just have natural aptitude to do that, and that's how a lot of people get into art to begin with. Is some people are just inherently good at looking at something, copying it, and it looking pretty vaguely like what they copied, and they think, oh, I could be an artist. Except the difference, I think, is that in order to be an artist, you need to learn how to draw it from your mind, not just from looking from reference.
Yeah.
But I think that came from like a love of comic books and the superhero genre. All started with Spider-Man the Animated Series and Batman the Animated Series, because they were personally my favorite shows as a kid. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is also a comic, G.I. Joe, which is also a comic. All of those things that were on in the early 90s got me personally into superheroes. And from there, you move on to getting, since your parents know you like it, like I used to have Todd McFarlane Spider-Man bed sheets. Like, that's nuts when you think about it. Like, as a 3 or 4 year old, that's how big McFarlane was back then, is that I had a pillowcase, and I must have had a whole full duvet set. I don't remember.
I remember those bed sheets, and I remember always reading the panels, because you could read the speech bubbles.
Not only that, but it was there was no color. It was just the black and white inks of Tom McFarlane panels with the letters. Like, it's pretty fucking dope. You can't even buy that nowadays. You can't get like just the black and white inks with the letters of McFarlane Spider-Man. So I still have those bed sheets, and I used them up until I moved in with my fiance, and we got we started sharing a bed. I had to let the Spider-Man bed sheets go.
But you still have them though, right?
Yeah, I still have the pillowcase somewhere.
Okay.
I put it in storage so I can give it to my kid one day. But
here, kid, this sweaty, disgusting old rag that may be able to be legible.
It's a bit off yellow, but it will work. So.
It's Spider-Man, though. Read it.
Yeah, I don't like Spider-Man. Well, fuck you. Ain't my kid. So loved all that, and then you and I loved action figures as a kid. Holy crap, were we spoiled with action figures?
Like, we had a whole room full of boxes.
Well, we were given a lot of sympathy as kids because we moved to America when we were quite young, and I feel like since if we were well behaved, we'd always get paid off with action figures.
Yeah, and like some sort of McDonald's or pizza or donuts from Dunkin' Donuts. It was always a theme day. It was like, it's toy and donut day, or it's toy and pizza day.
It was the best of days. Let's just
it
call
was
it
the
that.
best of days. Yeah.
You want to get McDonald's and buy some action figures? Like, even as a 27-year-old man, I'm like, that sounds like a great day. And you're buying? Great.
Yeah, sign me up. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
I just have to not speak at dinner and be normal and well behaved. Sounds good.
And some of the toys now, I'm just like, man, I wish I had that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Anyway, so those are the inspirations, the action figures as well.
Oh, yeah, because we created all our own stories. Like, we always still talk about this day. Some of the best games we played as kids was we were in America in our basement. We had like a big bar, and it was empty because it wasn't being used. And you loved like Batman animated series at the time, and you had all the action figures. They weren't my Batman action figures; they were yours. I was buying all the Spider-Man ones. You had all the Batman ones, and you were building up that bar as Wayne Manor. And you was pretty clever because you had like the Wayne Manor toy, but then below the bar, like where you would put drinks and stuff, you built like the Batcave. And I was always like, even as a kid, I was like, that's a really fucking good idea. I was like, that's exactly like Wayne. That's like that's dope. Meanwhile, I had Spider-Man's flat in Gotham City because we combine universes on a single bar stool. That was his apartment.
That's right. Yeah, Spider-Man like visited Gotham City in a little apartment.
All of his furniture was from wrestling action figures because we loved the Attitude Era as kids. So I had like you had like chairs and all that stuff to make like furniture for the action figures. But we used to play a lot of games. We used to come up with a lot of stories, and you just start falling in love with not only those characters, but the idea of playing with those characters in a quote-unquote literal toy box and a imaginary one.
Yeah.
And then those figures led to comics, because we weren't really into the comics at that point. It was more just we loved the TV show, but we had no exposure to that until. Do you remember that store in Allendale, which is in New Jersey? Jambalaya. Do you remember that store?
Hell yeah, I remember comics that we used to buy from there. There's a load of Spider-Man comics in particular that I'm sure you're probably going to talk about right now that I
Yeah,
remember seeing on the stands there.
that was like a kind of kids store. Lots of baseball cards, Pokemon cards, knickknacks, stocking stuffers, joke toys, and then in the back they had tons of long boxes of comics from about 5 years ago. At that point, there was a crap ton of Peter Parker Spider-Man, and I remember you were actually the one that got them. You bought like 50 issues of them and stuff. And you used to cut like pictures out and stuff. I forgot what you did. I don't know what
I
you
know,
did
I
with
can't
that.
believe I used to do that. I mean, I collect comics to this day, and thinking about cutting any of them at all, it just like sends a shiver down my spine.
I know. But that was like an exposure, and I was like, oh, this art. Like, I love this. And we would start copying the art. I remember you used to copy John Romita Jr. Spider-Man. I used to do it as well. And then as time went on, you stopped. I played with action figures until I was like 13 or 14. Like, I was very late. I used to have to hide them from my friends. They would come over, and I'd have like a box of like the big, I loved the big G.I. Joe figures
Yeah.
and all of the Marvel figures. And like, I realized that I was late because I had action figures of the third Lord of the Rings film. And I was
Oh
like,
wow.
that's late for me. Like, I was like 14. Like, I was like, all right, wrap this up, kid. Like, um,
It's
but
time to leave the Shire.
yeah. So I was buying. It was the first time that all these Marvel Legacy figures were coming out, and Marvel Legacy. This is the first time action figures, like because how popular Todd McFarlane's toy company was, and how realistic he was making toys look. Tons of competitors came out at that time, and we just got a flush of amazing looking action figures. So this Marvel Legacy line, this is the first time, Spider-Man can move his hands all around, and he's got like 8 joints on each arm, and completely bendy. And I remember on my birthday, it was my grandfather on our mother's side. He got me for my birthday a Spider-Man toy, and it was the McFarlane Spider-Man Marvel Legacy. And in the back, every single one of these Marvel Legacy toys comes with a comic book. And in the back was a Spider-Man comic, and I still remember it to this day because I have like 12 copies of it on my shelf now. But it was him teaming up with Silver Sable, and I remember as a kid just looking at it like, this is like the best art I've ever seen in my life. And then I bought a Daredevil action figure, and for some reason, I guess since McFarlane was so popular at that point, the one issue they put with Daredevil was the one issue that he did of Daredevil back in the 80s, which is not a very good issue. It's not very good art in it, to be honest, compared to what he became, because it's not, you wouldn't look at it and be like, oh, that's Todd McFarlane. You'd look at it and be like, oh, that's like John Byrne or something like that.
Right.
But I was like, I saw the name, I saw the familiarities, so I started researching that guy, and I really got into his artwork.
And this is before, I don't know, was the internet around? Did we have internet at this time?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so you were exploring. Okay, I didn't know if like we just had AOL dial-up at this time or not.
I think I first, no, we had AOL dial-up in the 90s, but I think I got my first computer when I was 12 or 11.
Okay.
But anyway, I was researching it. I just skipped over that you and I made a comic book at one point when you were probably 11 and I was like 9 or 8. That we named Raven, who is one. Okay, that's already a character's name in the DC universe. He also looked exactly like Deadpool,
Yeah, he did.
like to a T, except he was like all black, but I think he was colored in red. His bad guy was Jigsaw, like because he gets his face smashed up and then he hates the main character, and it was just like a complete rip-off. And I remember you were drawing the book at first, and I was coloring it, and I did a terrible job coloring it. I was giving people like yellow trench coats and like purple faces and stuff, like real bad stuff. And I remember you actually got like really mad at me. You're like, you're ruining my art.
Oh
But
man, oh you know that our father still has that.
I know, I can't
Yeah,
believe we found it like a couple years ago.
that was
The
amazing read.
story, the story. He's basically like Batman slash Nightwing. It's just a complete like amalgam of all like the stuff that we loved, and yeah, it was jokes. But that was like us drawing together, which was a lot of fun. But one thing I realized like, yeah, I loved all these action figures. You stopped liking that stuff because you became a teenager and a pothead and all that stuff, which is how it goes.
Yep, pretty
Same
much.
thing
I
happened.
was just like, Spider Who? I'm getting drunk tonight.
Spider, who hit this blunt with me? Wow!
We can wall crawl? Check it out.
Well, same thing happened to me. But there's one side of stuff that I liked as a kid that you were not into at all, and this is because of my friend Teddy that I had as a kid. I got heavily into anime, and not just loads of anime, but very particular anime that came out on Toonami in the 90s. And that was Dragon Ball Z #1. That was show I fucking loved as a kid. That to me is still the best Superman story ever told. Like, Goku is essentially just Superman. It's the same fucking plot. He comes from outer space. He lands on the planet. His planet's been blown up, and like it's literally like the same exact story, but through like a Japanese filter. But it's brilliant, and I absolutely loved it. And then I got into shows like Trigun, Kenshin, Lupin the Third. And looking back now, because I was thinking about this today, I was like, I think the reason I liked all that stuff because it wasn't always the story that I loved, but I loved the art styles. Like the art style of Dragon Ball is the same art style on the video games Dragon Quest, Chrono Trigger, all this stuff. I think I was just growing a love for art in general, and not just art, but cartoony art. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I love Michelangelo and like I love all this stuff. No, I couldn't give two shits about them. Anything that looked realistic was not my bag. Like, I loved anything that was super cartoony, where fingers look like sausages, etc., like stuff like that.
Well, think about it. We, as you said, Batman the Animated Series and Spider-Man the Animated Series was their own cartoon feel. I mean, Spider-Man was obviously paying tribute to Ditko and Stan Lee's original creation, and that way it looked, and it brought those pages to life. I mean, like I said, watching that show, Spider-Man moves the way you imagined he moved when you were reading comics. Batman the Animated Series, they gave Gotham, they gave those characters their own look and feel, but it was a cartoony feel, and that I really think helped shape storytelling for us and the way we want to see these characters, because that's our first exposure to these characters.
Exactly, and the first exposure is always going to be, I guess, your favorite in some ways, depending on what you're talking about. But like, especially Bruce Timm's art, like that's a huge inspiration on me today. I just love cartoony art. I don't know why. I think it's because I just loved all this stuff as a kid. Like, even now, like I have this new hobby where I'm retro game hunting. I've bought a fuck ton of systems, like Super Nintendo. Well, I haven't bought Super Nintendo. Nintendo 64, GameCube, yada yada yada. I bought all this crap because it's just a good getaway for me. But I'm being drawn to buying games now that have great artwork in them. I look up games, I'm like, oh, that's drawn by the same guy that did Dragon Ball Z. Oh, I need to get that game. And well, I'm like, oh, that game's got pretty art. I'll get that game. And I've just realized, like, fuck me, I'm obsessed with like cartoony art. Like, draw me a nice picture of a cartoon, and I'll give you money, like straight up.
It's a true passion for you, isn't it?
It is, but it's definitely something that faded in high school because I too started smoking weed, as you do sometimes as a teenager. I heavily got into playing guitar and bands. I became a massive fan of bands like The Grateful Dead and Fish. I followed Government Mule around. I fucking really got into that music scene. And like I was definitely in high school, I was still sketching. I drew my own Spider-Man comic. I drew a Deadpool vs. Punisher comic. I mean, none of these ever got finished. Batman, all while in class, I was always doodling.
Yeah, to interrupt, and actually, you'll like this. I remember specifically because I used to doodle a lot in class as well, and
Yeah.
I still drew a lot. I mean, there's at one point I was at university, and I was like, you know what? I want to go ahead and be a comic book artist. I was about 22, and I was like, I want to do this, and then I started to try and draw things out.
That's the same age I said I wanted to do it.
Yeah,
That's nuts.
except for you did it and I didn't. But I was looking.
Yeah, but what was you trying? Like, I'm gonna do it. You like drew one picture. You're like, that's good enough for me. That took ages.
It was more or less. I started. So as you said, we were good at tracing, and then we were good at copying and mimicking art. So obviously continued to do that more and more, and like bringing. I even had inking pens, had all that stuff. And
Wow, inking pens.
yeah, well, I was big time then. I was really dedicated. So I I then went, okay, let me try and draw. Do you remember I came up with like a cowboy western story and I had these different characters and I have those on Facebook. I saw them the other day on my time
Oh,
hop
really?
and they are fucking dreadful. But funny, and there's at one point there's this prostitute who looks like I wanted her to be lifting up her dress, but she looks like she's just scratching her fanny. It's it's the worst. So
Oh,
anyway,
you need to post those on our Facebook. I want everyone to see
I
that.
will. I'll post those, and also, so you'll like this because when I was in high school, I used to doodle a lot as well. And there's one image that I remember drawing that I took so much time. I was copying it, but it was a Todd McFarlane Spawn cover,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was him, and it had all the chains like rocketing out in his cape, and I just immediately saw that and was like, wow, that looks so cool and so
Hmm.
badass as well. So I drew that, and I remember to this day, like people in class even would throughout that week. I think it took me like a week to draw it in all the classes. Would be like, "Wow, it's looking really good," and then the next day they'd be like, "How's it coming?" And then like the next day, be like, "Oh yeah, it looks really good." So yeah, it was definitely something that I think we both still love and have a passion for. But there's some things that I like to do, but don't want to make it a anything besides like a fun little hobby. And there's other
Yeah, of
things that,
course.
yeah, the other things that I go for, like this podcast I've been talking about for almost a year. I was like, we got to do this. We just got to find the right thing, and we have. So anyway, sorry, I'm taking over, and I don't want to do that.
How
Uh,
dare you? This is a podcast about me, good sir.
so yes, continue, my good friend.
But it's funny you just said Spawn there because somehow Spawn was not exposed to me as a kid. I think the first time I saw Spawn was in a Soul Calibur video game. Like he was a special character. I don't know if you know what Soul Calibur is, but it's
I
basically
do know
Mortal
what Soul
Kombat.
Calibur. Yeah, yeah, I know what it is.
But so I never even knew Tom McFarlane was associated with Spawn like for the longest time. But in high school, I don't know if you remember, but our dad, through his job, he could get free magazines, quote unquote, from Borders in America. So on the weekends, I would go with our father, and he'd be like, "Take any magazines you want." And I'd be like, and there was a comic rack, and I was like, "Oh, I haven't read comics in a while. Do these count as magazines?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're magazines." So I used to stock up like on comics, and this was around the time that Civil War was about to come out. So I was like, "This is cool. Every hero's finding each other. Like, I'm getting into this." And that really got me back into comics. And since we were going to Borders a lot, they used to have trade paperbacks. And you and I never bought trade paperbacks until we started getting into it. I know the book that you really got into was The Dark Knight Returns. And you were like, "Go!" That
Oh,
was like the first Batman book you read. And you were like, "Go!"
it was the first proper serious Batman book, and I'm sure that anyone listening to this podcast has probably read it. And if you haven't, what are you doing? And please hit stop now and go and pick up that book, and then come back to us after you've read it, because it really is just from start to finish a game changer for Batman, a game changer for comic books, and endless, endless joy out of that book for me. I could read that book tonight and love it just as much as I did the first time, if not more. It is incredible. I love that book.
Now, I took a. I remember you gave it to me, but I couldn't get past the first page because I think I was just a bit too young for it at the time.
Sure,
Like
yeah, I
it
was
was
I was
very
like 13 when I read that book.
it was a bit too heavy for me. The first comic book I ever actually read, because I never read these single issue comics as a kid. Never read a single fucking word balloon. It was all just looking at the art. That's all I was interested in. It wasn't until I was in Borders and I was looking at the big trade paperbacks, and my dad was like, "Do you want one? Because there's an offer on. You can get one for $10. So I'll buy you one." I was like, "Oh, awesome!" And I was like, "Well, let me get a big one then." So I grabbed the biggest one I could find, which was Batman: The Long Halloween. And I flipped through. I was like, "Oh, this art's really cool and cartoony. I'm getting the art boner over this. Let's grab it." And I took that, and I remember sitting in the basement. This is when we lived at our second house in America, where you and I lived in this gigantic basement where I had one room which was next to the garage and the washing machine, and you had the other room, which was really nice, where you had your own
It
bedroom,
was a
your
mini
own
apartment.
kitchen,
Yeah,
and
it was a mini
you had
apartment.
you had the hookup, and then when you went to university, I had the whole bottom floor, and I was a fucking G because I just had real estate, man. I was like, oh baby. Anyway, I remember sitting down in that basement and reading Long Halloween, and I just could not put it down. I was like, who is it? Who is the holiday killer? I must know. I remember telling our mum as well, like, you should read this shit. This shit is good. I was like, you like Sherlock Holmes? Read this. This is some good shit. And so I was getting into that. I really loved that series. And then Civil War started happening. And it's funny because I know...
In the comics, not in real life.
Yeah. It's 1882. And I don't know. But I remember reading Civil War. And I loved it. And I wasn't reading the trade paperback. I had all the single issues of it, which I wish I kept today. But I don't know where they've gone. But I loved Spider-Man's story in that book. It's the best part of that book is him exposing himself to the world, his face, not himself. He's just like, look, my penis, woo! And he takes his mask off, and then after
Spider-Man's a flasher.
Yeah, after Civil War ended, I didn't follow any other character. I was like, well, I want to know what happens to Spider-Man. So I kept reading Spider-Man after that, and I started collecting the trade paperbacks of all of his stories after that, and I really got into Spider-Man heavily during that period. And I know that you and I, like, you got into comic books as well, and we were both reading them and both getting trade paperbacks, but you were already off at university. You came back at one point, and you got back into Batman the Animated Series because you were an avid collector of DVDs. And
still,
like,
I still am, man. I still buy Blu-rays to this day.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I collect old video games. Everyone's got their little thing.
Well, it's special features. That's what I can only get through that, and I can't get that through renting something on Amazon Prime or whatever.
Yeah, dude, I totally get it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But you were in a bit of a rut because I think your time at university was ending, and you were back home, and you needed to figure out what the fuck.
Well, yeah, I was kicked out. I was kicked out for a semester, basically, is what you're saying. Yeah, I joined a. I joined a fraternity, and I didn't go to my classes, and I got kicked out. I got accepted by the fraternity, but I didn't get accepted by the school after that.
Wow.
So yeah, I went back, and yeah, I was working at that music shop, and all I was doing was just obsessing over anything to make myself distracted, like Batman.
Well, you and I started hanging out again a lot.
Yeah.
And you really got into back into Batman the Animated Series because you bought the DVDs and you were watching it. And I was really into clay animation at that point. And I don't even know how I got into clay animation, but it was a big part of my life from 13 to 17. I was online doing it. I remember I sold like a Santa Claus movie I made and all of this stuff. But you and I were at one point making a Batman clay animation. And the budget, if we actually made it, the budget would have been like at least like 15 grand for what we wanted to do.
Do you remember we were cutting out massive cardboard pieces and making holes in them and making them buildings?
Yeah, building a Gotham City. That was
we
the
were
plan.
building a Gotham out of cardboard. Man, we went crazy.
Yeah, and I had nothing else to do because I was not a good student in high school because I just didn't care. It's not like I was stupid. It's just that type of... I was an asshole teenager that was like, yeah, this knowledge is below me. Like that type of crap where you're like, I could do it if I tried, but I just want to draw pictures of Spider-Man in my notebook. I'm going to be somebody one day. And all the teachers are like, you need to get your shit together because life's about to start. I'm like, yeah, fuck off. I'm drawing this sweet picture of Wolverine. Screw you.
You don't even know his real name, I bet.
But, so that was all going on. And then I took a film class in high school. The same class you took, but 3 years later. And I was shown all of these old films like Double and Enemy, Citizen Kane, tons of just really great movies where I was like, holy crap. I was like, this is art that you don't need to draw. It just gets, it's just, the art of cinema to me is still like absolutely amazing. So I really got into that. And I stopped drawing for quite a long time. And I was reading some comics, but it was at the point now where I had to make money for myself, so I wasn't spending money on them. I think the last comic I bought in that period was Old Man Logan. I was buying single issues at Borders of that. But I went to film school in America, which was a hippie little school owned by the wife of Bernie Sanders, which is closed down now, and there's loads of scandals around that school now, apparently. But I went there for 2 years, and there, like, even though I wasn't really into superheroes that much anymore, my movie I made was about a guy called Credo, who's basically a superhero. And I played the character, like 200 pounds fat guy, like at 5'5", being a superhero with like a scarf around my mouth, a fedora on, and like a suit with like a leather jacket, which I got at a Goodwill.
Constantly breathing
like,
heavy and letting all his supervillains know where his exact
yeah,
location is.
in one of the coldest winters Vermont's seen in a good while as well. But it was good fun making it. It was very Sin City, that film.
I really hate to interrupt a megalomaniac when he's on a roll, but here's Web in Your Eyes.